Good morning. It is Tuesday, August 31st at about 10:30 in the morning. My name is Larry Cedar, and I'm back with you for another session on Sqanning. Today we're coming to you live on the Sqanning Facebook page directly. Usually I start on my Facebook page and then transfer everything over here, but today we are right on the Sqanning page, and I'm thinking I'm actually going to be doing pretty much all these sessions from the Sqanning page from this point forward. So I hope you're having a great day and welcome. And if you're interested in this process called Sqanning, which is a relaxation technique which utilizes the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. If you're interested in this technique, I'm glad to have you here. All you can say with all of these things is that it works for me, and I believe it will work for you. But everyone has different sensibilities about their own sense of being and enlightenment and in their bodies and their minds and so forth. And so this may not resonate for you, but if it does, I'm very happy. I'm happy to share it. Sqanning is a technique I developed over the course of several years based on the principles, I have to clear something off the screen here, the principles of a man named Thaddeus Golas, Golas. And he wrote a couple books, but this is his main book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment, in which he breaks the universe, everything in the universe up into two basic processes: contraction, squeeze your hands together, that's what contraction feels like, and expansion, release, expansion. And I was fascinated with this book, and I read it many, many times. I practically memorized it, and because I felt instinctively that it applied to my life and the issues and challenges that I faced. In that, if you began to look at the world through that prism of contraction, expansion, that everything in the world, everything in the universe is either contracting or expanding, it began to make sense to me. And I could begin to see what things and what moments and what experiences were contractive and which were expansive. And I began to assess my life in that way and see that I could move between those two states. I actually had a bit of control as to where I was. And what you want in life is a balance of contraction and expansion. Contraction is the bringing together of material, substances, thoughts, ideas to advance an agenda. Expansion is letting go of all of that, expanding, releasing, becoming permeative, becoming open, accessible, becoming nothing, just being. So you want to move between those two states ideally so that you are centered. And I began to notice further that at my unhappiest moments, my most confused moments, my most stressed moments, my most perplexed moments, I tended to be in a state of over-contraction. I tended to be thinking too much. I tended to be trying too hard. I tended to be rigid, restrictive, impermeable, solid, inflexible, obsessed, compulsive. I was contracting too much. And I found that the opposite, that if I could induce a state of expansion, release, relax, let go, become permeable and open, at peace, at one, in the moment, I became happier and more successful because I was more available to the options I had in life and could more effectively make decisions that advanced my agenda, which is to have a successful career, successful family and life and relationships. So I began to explore how I could make that happen. How do I become more expanded? Okay? And I began to notice a sort of physical association with these processes, with this concept. I began to notice that when I was contracted, I tended to be tense. And when I was expanded, I tended to be relaxed. And I said, well, it's really happening in the muscles. Yes, the thoughts, the mind can become contracted or expanded. Contracted being you're thinking too much. Expanded being you're open and available and calm and at peace. But I began to notice in particular how the muscles were related to these two states, contraction, expansion. And specifically, how if I could relax the musculature in my body, in effect expand, I could move my entire being, my entire consciousness into a more expanded, happier state. So I began to explore that. And that's how I came up with the practice of Sqanning. Sqanning is the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve this deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. I discovered that through the incremental release of muscular tension, just that simple act of going from this, squeeze your hands together, to this, relax. Make a fist, 3, 2, 1, release. My face, 3, 2, 1, let it go. If I could implement muscular release on an incremental scale, a small scale, bit by bit, that it was cumulative, and that if I kept at it, I moved into a further and further into a more expanded state, and finally into a completely expanded state, that being a state of calm, peace, stillness, joy, nothingness, empty, calm. So I began to practice it regularly, and now I practice it at least an hour a day. So I come here to share that technique with you. It's a beautiful technique in that it is very, very simple. I've already described it to you. You basically, if you understand the concept that I just explained to you, you know it and you can go. Say goodbye. But if you want to stay with me as I go through a typical session, then you're welcome. And that's all we're going to do today, is release muscular tension. One of the greatest benefits about it is that it's so simple. If you're in a troubled state of any kind, if you focus on incremental muscular release, while it might not seem directly related to the problem you're dealing with, it might not seem related at all, it will bring you into a more expanded state where you can more effectively deal with that problem, cope with that problem, merge with that problem, embrace that problem, solve that problem. And the other benefit, of course, is that you can't contract and expand at the same time. So any amount of expansion, any amount of muscular release brings you into an expanded state, because even the smallest amount of expansion moves you that much further away from contraction. That's all I'll say as a way of introduction. Let's get started. We start every session the same way. Squeeze your hands together. That's contraction. What we're trying to do is immediately establish a physical sense of what it is to be contracted. We're getting out of our mind, out of our thinking process, into a physical process. I want you to concentrate now, not on what you think about all this, but how it feels physically. So see what it feels like to be contracted. You can feel it. It's a couple things, more than a couple things, but it is strength. It feels strong. But it's also, when taken to its extreme, when you are overly contracted, restrictive, painful, uncomfortable, limiting. You can't really do anything when your hands are tied up in this contractive state, so you are limited. So even as you intended when you started out to achieve something, which is to clasp your hands together and use your contractive abilities, at some point, as in life, we can become overly contracted, and then it becomes a problem. That is the point at which we need to expand, in this case through the incremental release of muscular tension. Now here, again, by way of demonstration, we're going to completely release all the muscular tension in our hands at the count of 3 and move from a state of contraction into a state of expansion. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, and release. Just see what that feels like. Again, we're trying to establish a physical consciousness. What did it feel like to contract as opposed to what it felt like to expand? You don't have to be too specific. Just notice the difference. Let's try it again. Squeeze your hands together. Tight, tight, tight. That's contraction. 3, 2, 1, and release. Feel the difference. Contraction, there's a tightness, there's effort being made, there's a focus and energy being directed towards the hands. It's a deliberate choice that we make. It takes effort, uses the muscles effectively, but also in a way that perhaps is tiring or uncomfortable. It's all those things. But that's contraction. That's what we do 90% of our day, is we contract. We bring together thoughts, ideas, physical substances. We build buildings. We write books. We post. We tweet. We engage. We work in a steel mill. We mow the lawn. We contract. We make things happen through the use of our musculature. So that's what it feels like. So again, we're trying to build a heightened consciousness of the distinction between these two. Contraction and, ready to release, 3, 2, 1, release. Expansion. Drop your hands to your sides and take a deep, deep breath. One more. And another. So now we further expanded. Breathing, breath, is expansive by nature. Your lungs fill, you've expanded. But when you're contracted, we tend to hold our breath. So by inducing a deep state of inhalation, we are reversing that process. We are expanding. We're going from contraction to expansion. So this is part 2 of what I call the preliminary phase of scanning. Part 1 being squeeze, release. Part 2 is the breathing. So we're inching our way into a more expanded state, strictly through the use or lack of use of our muscles. Building an association, building a consciousness of the difference between contraction and expansion. Let's start it again. Contraction, squeeze your hands together, tight, tight, tight. See what that feels like? And really squeeze hard. And on my count, I want you to release your hands. And I want you to let them drop to your sides. Take 3 deep breaths and sit for 15 seconds in absolute stillness and silence. And we'll talk about why in a second. 3, 2, 1, and release. Drop your hands to your sides. 3 deep breaths, followed by 15 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. 3 deep breaths. Here we go. Deep as you can. 15 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. So now a few things may have happened. You're changing states of consciousness. You're moving from what is our naturally contractive state, and we all tend to move around in a certain state of contraction. Our muscles sort of held, our mind sort of fixed on certain ideas and thoughts. We hold our position, we keep it together. So you're moving from that now into an expanded state. So you may notice a few things. You might feel a little disoriented or dizzy from the deep breaths. You might feel a little impatient or uncomfortable sitting absolutely still. Now you've begun to engage your contractive state. You're reversing that process, and contraction by nature wants to stay contractive. That's contracted, that's its job. So you're feeling resistance. But all these things are good. The discomfort, the dizziness, the resistance, the strange sense of awareness that something is off. This is all excellent. You're moving from a contractive into an expansive state. So we're going to continue down those lines and stay with it, even if it feels uncomfortable or disoriented. I always feel resistance to this process, always, and I've been doing it for years. Because when I'm contracted, I naturally want to stay contracted, both out of a sense of protection. Being contracted makes you feel as if you have a sort of guard up. Your mental, physical state is held, protected. You're guarded. And also just out of habit. We contract out of habit. So it's difficult to move out of that natural state of contraction. We're going to do it again. This time we're going to take 5 deep breaths, followed by 60 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. So here you go. Squeeze your hands together. Tight, tight, tight. Really feel it. And now your muscles have started to relax. They become more expanded. So this might feel a little better now. You might feel actually stronger. Your muscles are loose and relaxed. Any good athlete or dancer or anyone who does something physical for a living knows that the more relaxed they are, the better their muscles function. I know as an actor that when I'm more relaxed, I perform better on stage or on camera, anywhere. Everything just works better. So now your muscles are starting to become more relaxed. And take note of these changes as you become more expanded, how you feel different. Because as you become familiar with it, it becomes more easy to visit that expanded state in future sessions. So squeeze tight, tight, tight. Get ready. 5 deep breaths, 60 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Squeeze as tight as you can. 3, 2, 1, and release. Drop your hands to your sides. 5 deep breaths, 60 seconds, absolute stillness and silence, but continue to breathe. Here we go. 60 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle. You don't have to count. I'll count for you. Deep breath. Now you might find yourself, when you take these long periods of stillness and silence, drifting off. You might even fall asleep. You might forget where you are, what you were doing, or why you're doing it. That's all good. Decisions, thought, awareness, consciousness, these are contractive processes. Consciousness is a contractive state of being. So as you become more expanded, you become less conscious. You move into a state of pure being. You're not thinking anything. You're not aware of anything. You just exist. And that's great. So if you start to feel those things, if you drift off, that's fine. Again, you've been engaged, you've been contracted, now you're moving away from that, you're disengaging. I like to use the analogy of you've been in a river, rushing down a river, and you decide to step off onto the shore. Let the river continue, but you're off on the shore just sitting, doing nothing. You've stepped out of that process. So that's expansion. So these are what I call the preliminary steps in scanning. Squeeze, release, deep breaths, stillness and silence. And stillness and silence in particular, because if we are a contracted person, if we're in a contracted state, we're typically doing or thinking. So stillness and silence are the opposite of doing and thinking. Stillness is the lack of activity. So you make a conscious decision to not move a muscle. That sends a signal to your body that we have stopped doing. We have stopped contracting. Any movement towards expansion is a movement away from contraction. So it's a subtle thing, but you'll feel the challenge of that in that your body wants to keep doing, but you're going to say no. We're going to sit in absolute stillness and silence. And silence, because again, words, thoughts, ideas are noise, sound. The pulling together of words, thoughts, ideas, sentences, paragraphs, consonants, syllables, vowels to form ideas. So when we go silent, we've stopped that contracted process. And your mind might still race, but you're going to have this tug of war between contraction and expansion, at least initially. And let that happen, that's fine. But we use muscular activity, stillness, silence, muscular release, to wrest control from the contractive process and put it in the hands of the expansive process. So that's phase one. That's the preliminary phase of scanning, and you can do any or all of those at any time in your day. Deep breaths, squeeze, release, stillness and silence. You could take 30 seconds of stillness and silence and have achieved a certain amount of expansion. Never underestimate the power of the smallest expansion. Again, you can't contract and expand at the same time, so any expansion moves you away from contraction. 30 seconds, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half hour, an hour, whatever you have time to do. The important thing is that you begin expanding. So now we move into the nuts and bolts of the technique, which is the actual incremental release, which I mentioned at the beginning of the session. We're going to move through our body, scan our body, looking for pockets of muscular tension and releasing that tension. And we're going to move through muscular zones. We're going to isolate certain parts of our body and concentrate on letting go of the smallest amount of muscular tension from that area. We start with zone one, the face. And again, we're using the muscles to guide our entire being into a more expanded state. We expand our musculature, the rest of the body takes note and follows suit. The reason it works to concentrate on releasing muscular tension when you're trying to clear your mind or calm yourself or get rid of compulsive, obsessive thoughts is that you can't contract and expand at the same time. Thoughts are contractive. If you put your full focus into an expansive act such as muscular release, it moves you away from contraction. Your brain, like a muscle which has been holding on, contracted around certain thoughts or ideas, starts to relax and let go. And those thoughts just float away, and you're left with a still, calm, clear mind. So we're just using the muscles to achieve that. Start with the face. On my count, I want you to release the smallest amount of tension from your face. Watch my face. You can look in the mirror if it helps. 3, 2, 1, and release. You saw how I let all the tension in my face go? This snap is a turning off of the switch, turning off the power to those muscles. Muscles must use power to contract. It takes no power to relax. So you turn off the power and your muscles release. One of the greatest benefits of scanning, incremental muscular release, is if you think of it, if you're walking around in a slightly contracted state all day, and I'm always amazed when I start to scan how much tension I've been carrying, you're using power. So when you relax, you're using less power and you'll have more energy. In fact, sometimes when you're tired, if you scan, you might get a sudden burst of energy because the burden, the weight of holding all that muscular contraction was exhausting. And when you relax, that energy is no longer being asked of you. That demand is gone and you are free to just be, and it's energizing. So you might see that as a side benefit. The face, 3, 2, 1, and release. You feel that dropping sensation? That's it. That's scanning. Letting go of muscular tension, going from this to this. Ah. One more time, the face, 3, 2, 1, and release. Okay? Take a note of how that felt. That slight incremental release of muscular tension is the core of scanning. That's all we're going to do. If you want to practice scanning, just find a way to release muscular tension in some or every part of your body. Zone 2 is the top of the head. 3, 2, 1, let it go, and release. So you feel that spreading sensation. And we'll move through these rather quickly, but just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. But all you're looking for, and you might not feel a huge change, all you're looking for is the slightest change, that subtle change from this to this, from this to this. Look at my face, from this to this. Zone 3 is the back of the head. Think about the muscles at the back of your head for a moment. And one of the things you learn from scanning is a heightened awareness of your state of being. You start to have a higher consciousness of how contracted those muscles are. You might not think about the back of your head much, but try it. Because what you're developing is the ability to focus on an area of your body and control the state of that body, in this case, the muscles, to move it from a contracted to an expanded state. So the back of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. You feel that spreading sensation? That's the muscles moving from their crimped up, contracted state to their relaxed, smooth state. So again, the back of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. There it goes. So now we've done the face, the top of the head, the back of the head. Let's do them all together. 3, 2, 1, let it go, and release. And sometimes it helps to exaggerate. Like if I go, I'm contracted, and 3, 2, 1, I'm expanded. I mean, just let go of the muscular tension. That's the sensation you're looking for, is that feeling of letting go, letting go, letting go. It's incremental, it's cumulative. So as you do it, as you move through the body and more parts of your body begin to expand, everything starts to kind of want to expand. The body wants to be at one with itself. It doesn't want to be at war with itself. So if you direct part of your body to expand, the rest senses something is changing and wants to follow suit. And you may begin to feel other parts in your body letting go as you focus on one particular part. Zone 4 is the neck. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, the neck. 3, 2, 1, and release. 3, 2, 1, the neck, and release. And sometimes when I'm scanning, this can be a frustrating process because contraction wants to contract. And sometimes it takes a long time to persuade your body to let go. But that's why it's important that you search for even the smallest change, because that's a victory. So for instance, my neck is pretty tight right now. It's fairly contracted. I carry a lot of tension in my neck, as most people do. So when I go to relax and release the tension in that area, I might not feel much of a change. It might still feel tight. But did I feel any change? Any change counts. Take that as a victory and say yes. Because again, it's incremental, it's progressive. It takes 100 pennies to make $1. But if you keep collecting those pennies, you will have $1. So each of these changes is like a penny. It's small, but it's moving in the right direction. So don't be frustrated and don't be discouraged by a slow progression into relaxation or expansion. If you stay with it, it will happen. The neck, 3, 2, 1, and release. What's important is that you stay with it, that you put in the time. Don't give up. Look for those little indications of release. Little tiny indications. That means you're succeeding. Just because you haven't become completely relaxed right away. I like to say there's something called the breakthrough, what I call the breakthrough. Typically it happens to me at 15 minutes of practice of doing this. If I'm particularly tense, it might take longer. But if you stay with it, you will break through. Your body will eventually give in to this expansive, relaxive process. The neck, 3, 2, 1, and release. There it goes. And one more time, the neck, 3, 2, 1, and release. So now you've done the face, the top of the head, the back of the head, and the neck. Let's do them all together. 3, 2, 1, and release. And now your head might start to droop. Let that happen. That's good. From zone 4 into zone 5, the shoulders, 3, 2, 1, and release. Let them drop. And again, the shoulders, 3, 2, 1, let them drop, and release. 3, 2, 1, the shoulders, release. Deep breath. Another. Another. 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Deep breath. And again, I personally drifted off for a minute there. That's great. That's what you want to do. You want to disconnect from the state of consciousness. Consciousness is a contraction. You want to disconnect and go to a place of nothingness. If you forget where you are, or what you're doing, or why you're doing it, that's good. Consciousness is contraction. We want to become unconscious. Zone 5, the shoulders again, 3, 2, 1, let them drop and release. You feel that slight slumping feeling. Zone 6 is the chest, stomach, and front of the waist, that plate of armor we wear as a guard to protect ourselves in the world. Let that go. 3, 2, 1, and release. Again, focus in on this area. See if you can actually experience that shift, that slight release of muscular tension. 3, 2, 1, and release. Zone 7 is down the back and into the pelvis. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, the pelvis. 3, 2, 1, and release. Again, down the back and into the pelvis. 3, 2, 1, and release. Zone 8, the final zone, is down the legs, across the knees, and into the feet. Think about your feet. If you feel a slight throbbing, that's excellent. That means you've directed your energy to that area. Your body is responding to your thoughts, which is great. You have that kind of control. You're directing your energy to your feet. The throbbing is your body saying, oh, do the feet need help now? It is sending blood to help them heal, to increase the circulation, to bring nutrients and oxygen. So you have that sort of power, and that's what practicing scanning does. It gives you a heightened awareness of your ability to control your own physical state of being, which is great. You don't need to pop a pill or take a drink or smoke a joint. You can actually induce a state of deep relaxation through this technique. The feet, on my count, allow yourself to release the smallest amount of tension in your feet, and just again, watch for that slight change. It doesn't have to be monumental or huge. If you feel any change at all, you have expanded. 3, 2, 1, the feet, and release. And again, the feet, 3, 2, 1, and release. One more time, the feet, 3, 2, 1, and release. Deep breath. One more. And another. 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Deep breath. So let's review. We started out with the preliminaries, which was squeeze, release, to establish that physical sensation of expansion, contraction, expansion. We took a series of deep breaths, which are expansive by nature, and we sat in stillness and silence. All these preliminary steps were intended to disengage from the contractive process. Again, when we're unhappy or troubled or obsessed or worried, we tend to be overly contracted. When we're physically racked with discomfort or pain of any kind, we tend to be overly contracted. So these preliminary steps kind of wrest control back into the expansive process. These are expansive steps. So it's a way of jump-starting the process. And you can use, as I said, any one of them anytime during your day. Sit in stillness and silence for 30 seconds. Take a deep breath. Squeeze your hands and release to remind yourself that if you're feeling bad, you're probably overly contracted, but you have the ability to change that simply by releasing muscular tension. Remind yourself. Then we worked our way through the individual muscular zones specifically to release muscular tension, to scan our body looking for pockets of muscular tension. In the case of scanning, releasing muscular tension is the key. It is the core. It is the essence of the technique. It is the very process, releasing muscular tension. The theory being that by releasing muscular tension, you induce a state of expansion that influences your entire being. Your consciousness, your mind, your soul, your spirit, everything begins to open up. The muscles are a guide. They're simple. They can either contract or expand muscles, as opposed to the mind, which can run loop-de-loops around you. The muscles can only do one of two things. So they're easy to deal with, and they're easy to direct. All we need to do is get better at recognizing the subtle change that happens when we expand. So we move through the zones of the body. 8 zones. The face, 3, 2, 1, release. The top of the head, do it with me. 3, 2, 1, release. There it goes. The back of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. The neck, 3, 2, 1, let it go, and release. And just let it happen. The shoulders, they're already dropping. 3, 2, 1, and release. The chest, stomach, front of the waist, 3, 2, 1, and release. That's zone 6. Zone 7 is down the back and into the pelvis. 3, 2, 1, and release. And finally, the feet. 3, 2, 1, and release. 3 deep breaths. Really deep. 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. And again, I forgot where I was. So that's expansion. And if you've been having a lot of obsessive thoughts or worries or had physical pain or discomfort, you've been overly contracted, then you just were able to bring yourself into a more expanded state. It's not necessarily completely relaxed, what I call a breakthrough, which happens occasionally, but you have moved the dial. And what we're doing, again, is we're moving in our day through contraction and expansion. We want to be centered. We want a combination of both. If we tend to become overly contracted, we want to get good at just inching ourselves back towards the state of expansion, so that we are centered. That's all we're doing. Very simple technique, very easy to use. All it requires is the discipline of application. And it's difficult to expand when habitually and fearfully we are addicted to contraction. It's our go-to solution. That includes physical action, that includes thought, worry, concerns. That includes working hard, that includes being physically active. It's addictive because it makes us feel alive. It does accomplish things. Contraction is an excellent thing, but we forget that there's a flip side to our consciousness, to our state of being, and that's the opposite, expansion. And you want balance. You don't want to be contraction, contraction, contraction. You want to learn how to expand so you can bring yourself into balance. That's all this does. Sqanning is the incremental release of muscular tension going from this to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. And that's it. So thanks for visiting. I end every session with rule 1, love yourself. Love is the most expansive act you can take in the universe because love involves embracing and opening yourself up to accepting all that is, including those parts of yourself that you may not love. But you have to love this. This is all we've got. This is what we were given. And when you do love yourself, when you embrace yourself, you will have expanded and you will be in a happier, more peaceful, more calm, more still, more joyous place. And when you have so much love in you that there's extra and it's spilling out, pass it around to anyone who happens to be around you because I guarantee you they could use it as well. Thanks a lot. Have yourself a great day and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.